The night air in Lagos carried the scent of suya and diesel fumes through the open window of Adunni's bedroom. But tonight, something else filled the air, betrayal so thick she could taste its bitterness on her tongue. Her trembling fingers held the bank statement she'd found hidden beneath Kemi's mattress, the number swimming before her eyes like accusations written in blood. 3 million naira. Gone. Their entire life savings, the money she'd scraped together selling girly headwraps at Balogun Market for 15 years, the funds meant for their daughter Fami's university education, all of it transferred to an account she didn't recognize. Her husband's signature sprawled across withdrawal slips like a death sentence to their marriage. The bedroom door creaked open behind her. Kemi stumbled in, reeking of expensive perfume that wasn't hers and whiskey that cost more than their monthly rent. His shirt was wrinkled, lipstick staining the collar a shade of red she'd never worn. For a moment, their eyes met in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Adunni, you're still awake." His voice carried that familiar tone of false concern, the same voice that had whispered promises of forever 20 years ago at their traditional wedding ceremony in Ibadan. She held up the bank statement, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. "Where is our money, Kemi?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Outside, Lagos never slept, generators hummed, night traders called their wares, and Afrobeat music drifted from a nearby bar. But in this moment, their small apartment felt like the edge of the world. Kemi's face shifted from surprise to defiance, the mask finally slipping away. "You wouldn't understand, Adunni. It's business. Real business, not your small market trading. Business." The word tasted like poison. "Our daughter's school fees, our rent money, the land we were saving for, that's business." He straightened his shoulders, transforming into a stranger before her eyes. "I'm building an empire, woman. Investing in oil contracts, real connections. You think selling head ties will make us rich? You think small like a village woman?" The cruelty in his voice hit her harder than any physical blow. This was the man who'd promised to cherish her, who'd held their newborn daughter with tears in his eyes, who'd eaten her cooking and praised her wisdom for 2 decades. Now he stood before her like a vulture, talking about her life's work as if it were dust. Building an empire with whose money? Her voice rose, years of suppressed frustration finally finding their voice. "With my sweat, my sacrifice, my prayers. While you drink with those big men at the club, I wake at 4 a.m. to catch the first bus to market. While you sleep till noon, I'm bargaining with suppliers, counting every naira twice." Kemi's phone buzzed with a message. As he read it, his face lit up with the kind of excitement she hadn't seen him show about their marriage in years. Whatever empire he was building, it was built on the foundation of their destroyed dreams. "Pack your things," he said without looking up from his phone. "I'm selling this place too. My business partners found me a better apartment in Victoria Island. You can go back to your family in Ibadan." The words hit her like lightning striking twice in the same spot. Not only had he stolen their future, but now he was discarding her like yesterday's newspaper. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of standing by his side through unemployment, illness, and shame, all of it reduced to "pack your things." But as Adunni looked at the bank statement in her shaking hands, something harder than diamond began forming in her chest. Kemi had made a terrible miscalculation. He'd forgotten that the village woman he was dismissing had survived Lagos for 2 decades. He'd forgotten that she knew every corner of Balogun Market, every trader, every supplier. He'd forgotten that respect in Lagos wasn't just bought with oil money, it was earned with character. And he'd forgotten the most important thing of all: loyal women, when betrayed, become the most dangerous enemies of all. The fluorescent lights of Zenith Bank buzzed overhead as Adunni sat across from Mr. Adibeo, the account manager who'd helped her save every naira for 15 years. His face showed the discomfort of a man forced to deliver devastating news to someone who trusted his institution with their dreams. "Mrs. Adunni, I'm truly sorry, but the account was in joint names. Legally, Your husband had every right to withdraw the funds. His fingers drummed nervously on the mahogany desk. However, if you suspect fraud. Fraud. Adunni laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the bank's marble walls. Can you call it fraud when a man steals from his own wife? When he destroys his own family for greed? She remembered how it all began. 3 months ago, Kemi had started coming home with stories of big opportunities. Oil contracts worth millions. Government connections who could make them rich overnight. Men in expensive Agbada robes who spoke of investments that would change their lives forever. These people know me from my university days, Kemi had explained, his eyes bright with ambition. My engineering degree, my connections at Shell, they need someone like me. Someone educated, someone they can trust. Adunni had felt pride swell in her chest then. Her husband, the brilliant engineer who'd struggled to find steady work in Nigeria's difficult economy, was finally getting the recognition he deserved. She'd encouraged him, even suggested using their savings as seed money if needed. What a fool she'd been. Now, sitting in the bank that had been her sanctuary, she understood the truth. Those men hadn't seen Kemi's potential, they'd seen his desperation. They'd recognized a hungry man willing to sacrifice everything for a taste of the wealth that surrounded them in Lagos's elite circles. Mrs. Adunni, Mr. Adebayo continued gently, perhaps you should speak to your husband. Sometimes these business deals, they take time to mature. Maybe the money will be returned soon. She stood up, adjusting her Ankara wrapper with the dignity that had carried her through 20 years of marriage. Mr. Adebayo, my husband didn't invest our money. He gambled it away trying to buy his way into a world that will never accept him. And now he wants to throw away his family too. The walk from the bank to Balogun Market felt like a funeral procession. Every street corner held memories of their life together. The pepper soup joint where they'd celebrated Funmi's first steps. The fabric store where he'd surprised her with expensive Dutch wax print for their 10th anniversary. The church where they'd renewed their vows just 5 years ago. At the market, her friend Marital was arranging colorful girly headwraps on her table, her round face creased with worry when she saw Adunni's expression. Sister, what is wrong? You look like someone died. Adunni collapsed onto the small wooden stool beside her friend's table. Around them, the market buzzed with its usual energy, traders calling prices in Yoruba, customers bargaining loudly, children weaving between stalls selling pure water and chewing gum. This place had been her salvation when Kemi couldn't find work, her pride when she single-handedly paid their rent for 6 months. Mama turned, what do you do when the person you trusted most in the world becomes your enemy? Her friend's experienced eyes searched her face. In the market, women shared everything, their troubles, their triumphs, their husbands' failures. But this felt different. This felt like the end of everything. He took the money. Marital whispered. Adunni nodded, and the admission felt like vomiting poison. Everything. And now he wants me gone so he can play big man with his new friends. The older woman's face hardened like concrete setting in the sun. These men, they think we are just decorations. They forget that we built everything they are standing on. They forget that without us, they are nothing. As if summoned by their conversation, Adunni's phone rang. Kemi's name appeared on the cracked screen, a name that used to make her smile now made her stomach clench with dread. Pack quickly, his voice was cold, businesslike. The new tenants want to view the apartment tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a taxi to take you to the motor park. Your bus ticket to Ibadan is already paid for. What about Funmi? What about her school? She can finish secondary school in the village. This Lagos life is too expensive anyway. The line went dead, leaving Adunni staring at her phone in the middle of the bustling market. Around her, life continued, women laughed, children played, traders made their daily bread. But her world had just collapsed into dust. Marital placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. Sister, let me tell you something about men like your husband. They think power comes from money and connections. But real power comes from knowing who you are and never forgetting it. Adunni looked up at her friend, seeing something new in those wise eyes. Not pity, but recognition. The look of one warrior acknowledging another. He wants to throw me away like garbage, Adunni said softly. But he forgot something important. I know all his secrets. I know where every naira came from. And I know exactly who he's trying so desperately to impress. The plan began forming in her mind like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Kemi thought he could erase 20 years of marriage with one phone call. He thought he could steal her future and walk away untouched. He was about to learn the difference between a loyal wife and a defeated woman. And that lesson would cost him everything he'd stolen and more. The small apartment felt like a tomb as Adunni moved through rooms that had contained her entire adult life. 20 years of memories packed into cardboard boxes, wedding photos, Funmi's baby clothes, certificates from her trading courses, all of it reduced to cargo for tomorrow's bus to Ibadan. But as she folded their daughter's school uniforms, her phone buzzed with a message that changed everything. Funmi's school principal, Mr. Okafor, needed to speak with her urgently about outstanding fees. The timing felt like a cruel joke. While Kemi was playing oil baron with stolen money, their daughter's education hung by a thread. At Funmi's secondary school in Surale, Mr. Okafor's office walls displayed certificates and awards that spoke of excellence and tradition. But his face carried the uncomfortable expression of a man forced to discuss money with a desperate mother. Mrs. Adunni, Funmi is one of our brightest students. Her WAEC scores could get her into any university in Nigeria. But we have rules about outstanding fees. How much do we owe? Adunni's voice was steady, though her hands trembled in her lap. 400,000 naira for this term, plus examination fees. I've been lenient because Funmi is exceptional, but the board is asking questions. The number hit her like a physical blow. Kemi had stolen 3 million naira for his fantasies while their daughter's future crumbled. The hypocrisy burned in her chest like acid. Mr. Okafor, give me 1 week. I'll find the money. Walking home through the crowded streets of Surale, Adunni felt the weight of impossible choices. Every face she passed seemed to mock her situation, young couples laughing together, families planning their futures, women who still believed their husbands would protect them. But at Balogun Market that evening, as she helped Mama Ton close her stall, a conversation from the neighboring table caught her attention. 2 women were gossiping about a familiar name. You heard about Chief Adebola's new business partner, one whispered. Some engineer who claims he has shell connections. They say he's putting big money into that oil block deal. Adunni's blood turned to ice. Chief Adebola, Lagos's most notorious businessman, famous for taking investors' money and disappearing like morning mist. 3 years ago, he'd convinced dozens of families to invest in a fake oil refinery project. The newspapers called it the biggest scam in Lagos history. The man even brought his wife to the meeting, the woman continued. Young girl, very fine. They say she's the one with the real connections. Wife. Adunni's heart hammered against her ribs. Kemi had been going to business meetings 3 nights a week. Coming home smelling of expensive perfume. Talking about new opportunities with a brightness she hadn't seen in years. Mama Ton noticed her expression and pulled her aside. Sister, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost. I think my husband might be involved with Chief Adebola. And I think he might be cheating on me too. The older woman's eyes widened. Everyone in Lagos knew Chief Adebola's reputation. Men who did business with him rarely kept their money, their dignity, or their families intact. Adunni, you need to be very careful. If your husband is mixed up with that man, you're in more danger than you know. That night, Adunni couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment made her jump, the generator outside, footsteps in the corridor, her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. At 2 a.m., she heard Kemi's key in the lock. He stumbled in drunk, but not alone. A woman's laughter echoed in the hallway before the door closed. Young, carefree laughter that cut through Adunni's heart like a machete. She lay perfectly still as Kemi crashed around the living room, knocking over furniture, mumbling about oil contracts and big money. When he finally collapsed on the sofa, she crept to the window and looked down at the street. A sleek Mercedes waited by the curb, engine running. Through the tinted windshield, she could make out a young woman fixing her makeup in the mirror, adjusting expensive jewelry that caught the streetlight. The kind of jewelry that cost more than most people's annual salary. Her phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Your husband owes Chief Adebola 5 million naira. Payment due in 48 hours. This is not a joke. Adunni's world tilted on its axis. Not only had Kemi stolen their savings and started an affair, but he'd borrowed money from Lagos's most dangerous businessman. Money he clearly didn't have. Money that would likely get him killed if he couldn't pay. But as she stared at the message, a cold realization swept over her. Kemi had signed documents as a married man. In Nigerian law, his debts were her debts too. His shame would become her shame. His mistakes would destroy not just him, but her and Funmi as well. The loyal wife was gone. In her place stood a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. She opened her laptop and began typing emails to every contact she'd made in 15 years of trading. Bank managers, suppliers, market association leaders, even the tax officials who'd audited her business. If Kemi wanted to play dangerous games with dangerous people, he was about to learn that his quiet wife had built her own network of allies. But first, she needed to find out exactly who this young woman was. And she needed to understand just how deep her husband's betrayal went. The rain drummed against the windows of Sheraton Hotel as Adunni sat in the lobby, watching Lagos's elite move through the marble corridors like peacocks displaying their wealth. She'd never felt more out of place, wearing her best Ankara dress among women dripping in gold and diamonds, but she had a mission that burned stronger than her discomfort. Following the Mercedes from last night had led her here, to the heart of Victoria Island where Nigeria's powerful conducted their business over expensive cocktails and handshake deals worth millions. Through careful questioning of the hotel staff, and a generous tip that strained her remaining savings, she'd learned that Chief Adebola kept a permanent suite on the 20th floor. The woman she'd seen in the car was Kemi's business partner's executive assistant. Her name was Gloria, 26 years old, and according to the gossipy receptionist, she had a taste for older married men and their bank accounts. Adunni positioned herself near the hotel's exclusive restaurant, pretending to read a newspaper while watching the entrance. At exactly noon, Gloria emerged from the elevator like a queen holding court. Everything about her screamed money: designer handbag, Italian shoes, hair extensions that probably cost more than Adunni's monthly profit. But as Gloria walked past, Adunni noticed something that made her stomach clench. The young woman wore a gold bracelet that looked familiar. Painfully familiar. The same bracelet Adunni had admired in a jewelry store window 6 months ago, the one Kemi said they couldn't afford because they needed to save for Funmi's education. "Excuse me," Adunni called softly, standing as Gloria passed her table. The younger woman turned, her beautiful face showing polite confusion. Up close, she was even more stunning: smooth skin, perfect makeup, the kind of effortless beauty that came from never having to worry about money. "Yes." Gloria's voice carried the slight accent of someone educated abroad. "I think you know my husband. Kemi Adebayo." The change in Gloria's expression was immediate and telling. The polite smile disappeared, replaced by something harder, more calculating. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The bracelet on your wrist. He bought it for you, didn't he? With money stolen from his daughter's school fees." Gloria's hand instinctively went to the jewelry, and Adunni saw fear flicker in her eyes. Not fear of confrontation, but fear of exposure. This woman was playing a dangerous game with dangerous people, and unexpected wives were not part of her carefully laid plans. Listen, Mrs. Whatever your name is. Your husband came to us. He wanted to invest, to make real money. If he made promises he couldn't keep, that's between you and him. The casual cruelty of the statement hit Adunni like a slap. This woman had helped destroy her family and spoke about it like discussing the weather. He stole 3 million naira from his own child's future. For what? To impress you. To buy you expensive gifts while his wife sells head ties in the market. Gloria's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with obvious irritation. Look, your husband is a grown man. He made his choices. Maybe if you had been the kind of wife who inspired him instead of holding him back. The insult hung in the air between them like poison gas. This woman, young enough to be Adunni's daughter, was lecturing her about being a wife. This woman who'd never scraped together rent money or stayed up all night nursing a sick child or prayed rosaries for a husband's job interview. Where is he now? Adunni asked quietly. Chief Adebola's private office. They are finalizing the oil contract. Your husband is about to become a very wealthy man. Gloria smiled coldly. Wealthy enough to afford a new life. A life that matches his ambitions. The implication was clear. Kemi wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing it to build a future with this woman. 20 years of marriage, dismissed for a young face and empty promises of oil wealth. But as Gloria turned to leave, Adunni called out one more question. Does he know about Chief Adebola's reputation? Does he know what happens to people who trust him with their money? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Gloria's face. What do you mean? Ask him about the refinery project 3 years ago. Ask him about the families who lost everything. Ask him why Chief Adebola changes his phone number every 6 months. The elevator doors closed on Gloria's troubled expression, but Adunni felt no satisfaction in planting seeds of doubt. Because now she understood the full scope of Kemi's betrayal. He wasn't just stealing from his family, he was leading them into a trap that would destroy them all. Her phone rang. The unknown number from yesterday. Mrs. Adebayo, this is Chief Adebola's office. Your husband's payment is now overdue. We need to discuss terms immediately. I'm not responsible for my husband's debts. In Nigerian law, married couples share financial obligations. You have 24 hours to produce 5 million naira, or we begin asset recovery procedures. Asset recovery. The euphemism sent chills down Adunni's spine. She'd heard stories about Chief Adebola's collection methods. They didn't just take money, they took everything. Houses, businesses, dignity, sometimes lives. As she walked out of the Sheraton into Lagos's humid afternoon, Adunni realized she was no longer fighting just for her marriage or her savings. She was fighting for survival itself. Kemi had sold their family's soul to the devil, and now the bill was due. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He thought he was dealing with a village woman who would accept her fate quietly. Instead, he'd awakened something far more dangerous, a mother protecting her child and a wife who finally understood that loyalty without respect was just another form of slavery. The real game was just beginning. The elevator to Chief Adebola's penthouse office felt like ascending to heaven or hell. Adunni's reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman transformed by desperation. Gone was the market trader who'd started this week with dreams intact. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, ready for war. The receptionist, a young man with expensive glasses and a condescending smile, barely looked up from his computer. Chief is in a meeting. You'll need an appointment. Tell him Mrs. Kemi Adebayo is here about the 5 million naira. The change in his demeanor was immediate. Within minutes, she was ushered into an office that screamed wealth earned through other people's suffering. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lagos Island, leather furniture that cost more than most homes, and walls lined with photographs of Chief Adebola shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Chief Adebola himself was smaller than she'd expected, a compact man in his 60s with eyes like a shark, dead, cold, calculating. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car, flanked by two large men who radiated menace like heat from hot coals. Mrs. Adebayo. I was expecting your husband. My husband is busy spending money he doesn't have on promises you never keep. A smile flickered across the chief's face, not pleasant, but appreciative of her directness. Smart woman. Smarter than your husband, certainly. He thinks oil contracts fall from trees like palm nuts. What do you want from us? Chief Adebola leaned back in his chair, stippling his fingers like a judge preparing to pass sentence. Your husband owes me 5 million naira. Plus interest, it's now 6 million. He has signed contracts, made guarantees. Very legal, very binding. With what collateral? We have nothing worth 6 million naira. Oh, but you do. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, their apartment, Funmi's school, the small plot of land in Ibadan that Adunni had inherited from her father. Even her market store, her source of independence for 15 years. Nigerian law is very clear about married couples and debt responsibility. Your husband's obligations become your obligations. His assets, your assets. His debts. He spread his hands like a preacher delivering a sermon. The trap closed around her like quicksand. Every sacrifice she'd made, every naira she'd saved, every dream she'd protected, all of it was forfeit because of Kemi's greed and stupidity. But, Chief Adebola continued, his voice taking on a tone of false generosity, I'm a reasonable man. I believe in family values, in protecting women and children from men's foolish mistakes. What are you proposing? Your husband has skills. Engineering background, connections at Shell, knowledge of the oil industry. I can use someone like that. Properly supervised, of course. Adunni's skin crawled as understanding dawned. You want to own him? I prefer the term long-term partnership. He works for me, exclusively, for 5 years. His salary pays down the debt. You keep your home, your daughter stays in school, and everyone benefits. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, bailiffs visit your apartment. Your husband's assets are seized, sold at auction. You lose everything, and he still owes me money. Plus, I file criminal charges for fraud. Nigerian prisons are not kind to men who steal from businessmen. The silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of Lagos traffic. Outside the window, millions of people went about their lives, unaware that one woman's world was being dismantled piece by piece. I need to think about this. Of course. But don't take too long. My patience, like my generosity, has limits. As Adunni stood to leave, Chief Adebola's voice stopped her at the door. Mrs. Adebayo. Your husband is currently at the Eco Hotel with his young friend, celebrating their future together. Perhaps you should discuss this offer with both of them. The cruelty was breathtaking. Not content with destroying her financially, he wanted to twist the knife of emotional betrayal as well. But as she walked back to the elevator, Adunni realized something important. Chief Adebola's cruelty revealed his weakness. He enjoyed other people's pain too much to be truly strategic. And that enjoyment would be his downfall. At the Eco Hotel, she found them exactly where Chief Adebola said they'd be, in the poolside restaurant, sharing champagne and laughing like teenagers in love. Kemi wore a new agbada that cost more than their monthly rent, while Gloria sparkled with fresh jewelry. They looked like a power couple celebrating a business triumph, not a cheating husband and his mistress spending stolen money. Adunni approached their table slowly, savoring the moment when they noticed her. Kemi's face went white as cotton, while Gloria's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. Adunni, what are you doing here? Kemi's voice cracked like a teenager's. I just met with Chief Adebola. About your debt. Our debt, according to Nigerian law. The color drained from Gloria's face now too. Whatever fantasy she'd been living, the reality of legal responsibility was crashing down like a collapsed building. You signed documents without reading them, Adunni continued, her voice steady and cold. You put our daughter's future as collateral for a scam. And you did it all for her. She looked directly at Gloria, who was now studying her manicured nails with sudden fascination. Did he tell you about Chief Adebola's reputation? About the families destroyed by his fake oil deals? About what happens when his investors can't pay? Adunni, you don't understand business, Kemi started. I understand perfectly. Chief Adebola owns you now. 5 years of your life, minimum wage salary, all to pay off money you stole from your own family. She turned to Gloria. Did he mention that part of his business plan? The young woman's confident facade cracked completely. 5 years. Kemi, you said this was a sure thing. You said we'd be rich in 6 months. And there it was, the moment when greed met reality. The moment when the fantasy of easy wealth collapsed under the weight of actual consequences. Gloria was already calculating her exit strategy, already looking for the nearest door. But Adunni wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and showed them both the photos Chief Adebola had shared. Our apartment, Fumi school, my father's land, all of its collateral now. Unless, of course, you want to spend the next 5 years as his property. Kemi's hands shook as he reached for his champagne glass. There has to be another way. Another solution. There is, Adunni said quietly. But it requires you to stop being a fool and start being a man. The game was entering its final phase, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Adunni held some of the cards. The Lagos Island police station at midnight felt like the end of the world. Fluorescent lights flickered over plastic chairs filled with people nursing various forms of desperation, families of detained relatives, victims of scams, wives seeking justice that the courts rarely delivered. Adunni sat among them, her market trader's instincts reading the room like a familiar language. Inspector Ogbonna emerged from his office looking like a man who'd seen too much of human nature's worst. His uniform was rumpled from a long day of dealing with Lagos's endless supply of crime, but his eyes sharpened when he saw Adunni. Mrs. Adebayo. You said this was urgent. She followed him into his cramped office, where case files stacked like small mountains and an electric fan pushed hot air around the room. On his desk, she placed copies of every document she'd managed to gather, bank statements, loan agreements, photographs from Chief Adebola's office, even printed screenshots of Gloria's social media posts showing expensive gifts and luxury hotel visits. Inspector, my husband has been defrauded by Chief Adebola. But more than that, I think Chief Adebola is using him to defraud others. Inspector Ogbonna's weathered face showed recognition at the name. Chief Adebola. We've been watching him for 3 years, ever since the refinery scandal. But he's careful, connected. His lawyers are better than our prosecutors. What if I could give you evidence? Real evidence, not just paperwork. The inspector leaned forward, suddenly interested. What kind of evidence? Adunni pulled out her phone and played a recording. Kemi's voice, drunk and boastful, filled the small office. Gloria, you should see the list of investors Chief gave me. Doctors, engineers, even some politicians. They think I have inside connections at Shell, but really I'm just the face to make the scam look legitimate. 5 million here, 10 million there, by the time they realize it's fake, we'll be in Dubai with new identities. The recording had been easy to make. 2 days ago, Kemi had come home drunk and proud, eager to impress what he thought was his admiring wife with tales of his criminal brilliance. He'd forgotten that Adunni had been recording their conversations since discovering his betrayal, initially for divorce proceedings, now for something far more serious. Inspector Ogbonna rewound the recording twice, his expression growing more serious each time. Mrs. Adebayo, this is exactly what we need. Your husband is confessing to conspiracy to commit fraud on a massive scale. There's more. She showed him Gloria's social media post, carefully annotated with dates and amounts. Every expensive purchase corresponds with a new investor joining their fake oil venture. They are not even trying to hide it. Why are you doing this? Your husband will go to prison if we act on this evidence. Adunni looked out the window at Lagos's endless lights, each one representing someone trying to build a better life through honest work. Inspector, my husband stole his daughter's future to chase fantasies of wealth. He betrayed 20 years of marriage for a woman young enough to be his child. But worse than that, he's helping to destroy other families, other dreams. If I don't stop him, how many more people will lose everything? The inspector nodded slowly. We'll need your cooperation. Wearing a wire, gathering more evidence, testifying in court. It won't be easy, and it won't be safe. Chief Adebola doesn't forgive traitors. I stopped being safe the moment my husband signed those contracts. Now I'm just choosing whether to be a victim or a fighter. That night, Adunni returned to the apartment to find Kemi packing expensive clothes she'd never seen before. Designer suits, Italian shoes, a Rolex watch that probably cost more than their annual rent. Gloria sat on their marriage bed, painting her nails and talking on the phone about vacation plans in Dubai. Going somewhere? Adunni asked from the doorway. Kemi jumped like a man caught stealing. Adunni. I thought we were just leaving me to face Chief Adebola's collection agents alone. Planning to start your new life while I explain to our daughter why she can't finish school. Gloria ended her phone call and fixed Adunni with a look of pure contempt. Your husband deserves better than this small life you've built for him. Some women inspire men to greatness, others hold them back in mediocrity. Greatness. Adunni laughed, but the sound held no humor. You call stealing from families greatness. You call destroying people's dreams success. I call making millions of dollars instead of selling head ties at the market an upgrade, Gloria shot back. The casual cruelty of the statement, the dismissal of 15 years of honest work, of building something from nothing, of supporting a family through pure determination, finally broke something inside Adunni. You want to know about greatness? Real greatness is working 16-hour days to pay for your child's education. Real greatness is standing by a man through unemployment, illness, and shame because you believe in your marriage vows. Real greatness is building something honest instead of stealing from others. She pulled out her phone and showed them both the police inspector's business card. But you're right about one thing, Gloria. My husband does deserve better. He deserves a cell in Kirikiri prison, where men who steal from families belong. The effect was immediate and devastating. Gloria's phone clattered to the floor as the color drained from her face. Kemi dropped his expensive suitcase, designer clothes spilling across the floor like the remnants of shattered dreams. Adunni, what have you done? His voice was barely a whisper. What you should have done months ago. Told the truth. Gloria was already moving toward the door, grabbing her purse and jewelry with the speed of someone who'd planned for this contingency. Kemi, I told you we should have left for Dubai last week. I told you your wife was dangerous. You're not going anywhere, Adunni said calmly. Inspector Ogbonna is downstairs with a warrant. For both of you. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of sirens rising from the street below. Through the window, they could see police vehicles surrounding the building, their blue lights painting the walls like a disco of justice. Kemi sank onto the bed like a man whose strings had been cut. 20 years of marriage. 20 years, and you betrayed me to the police. I betrayed you. The question hung in the air like a slap waiting to land. You stole our daughter's future. You signed away our home to criminals. You brought your mistress into our marriage bed. And you call my search for justice a betrayal. Gloria was frantically texting someone, probably Chief Adebola, probably warning him about the police operation. But it was too late. Inspector Ogbonna had been planning this raid for months, waiting only for the evidence that Adunni had provided. Mrs. Adebayo. Inspector Ogbona's voice called from the hallway. We are ready to proceed. As the police entered their small apartment, the home where she'd raised Funmi, celebrated birthdays, prayed for better times, Adunni felt no triumph. Only the hollow satisfaction of a necessary job completed. This wasn't revenge, this was cauterizing a wound to prevent infection from spreading. Kemi looked up at her as the handcuffs clicked around his wrist. I did this for us, Adunni. For our family. I wanted to give you and Funmi everything. You had everything, Kemi. You had a wife who loved you, a daughter who worshipped you, a family that believed in you even when you stopped believing in yourself. But that wasn't enough. You wanted more, and in reaching for it, you lost everything that mattered. Gloria struggled against the officers, her earlier confidence replaced by desperate panic. This is legal. I have rights. I know important people. So did Chief Adebola, Inspector Ogbonna said dryly. He's currently in custody at Ikoyi prison, along with 12 of his associates. Your oil investment scheme is finished, and so are all of you. As they led her husband and his mistress away, Adunni stood in the doorway of her empty apartment. 20 years of marriage, reduced to police reports and court documents. But for the first time in months, she could breathe freely. Her phone buzzed with a message from Funmi's school principal, Mrs. Adebayo. We heard about the arrest on the news. The reward money from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission should more than cover Funmi's fees. Justice sometimes does pay, doesn't it? Reward money. In all the chaos, she'd forgotten about the substantial reward offered for information leading to Chief Adebola's conviction. The money stolen from her family would be returned, plus compensation for her cooperation in bringing down one of Lagos's most notorious criminals. From her window, she watched the police convoy disappear into Lagos's midnight traffic. Tomorrow, the newspapers would carry the story, Market woman brings down multi-million naira fraud ring. But tonight, she was just a wife who'd chosen her daughter's future over her husband's freedom. And for the first time in months, that choice felt like victory. 3 months after the arrest, Adunni stood in the courthouse bathroom, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Today was sentencing day, the final chapter of a legal drama that had consumed her life since that night she discovered Kemi's betrayal. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the market trader who'd started this journey. This woman had harder eyes, straighter shoulders, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving the unthinkable. The courtroom was packed with reporters, victims of Chief Adebola's various schemes, and curious onlookers drawn by the scandal of a respected engineer's fall from grace. Adunni took her seat in the front row, directly behind the prosecutor's table, close enough to see Kemi's face when the judge delivered his fate. Justice Adebola, no relation to the criminal chief, was a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for harsh sentences. She'd presided over some of Lagos's most notorious fraud cases, and her presence meant serious consequences were coming. The defendants will rise for sentencing. Kemi stood slowly, his expensive agbada replaced by a simple white shirt and black trousers. 3 months in Kirikiri prison had stripped away his false confidence, leaving behind the man Adunni had married 20 years ago, smaller, more fragile, finally understanding the weight of his choices. Gloria, standing beside him, had lost her glamorous polish entirely. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, no confident smile. Prison had a way of revealing who people really were beneath their pretensions. Chief Adebola, in his orange prison uniform, showed no emotion at all. This wasn't his first conviction, and his dead eyes suggested it wouldn't be his last attempt at crime. Chief Samuel Adebola, Justice Adebola began, her voice carrying the authority of Nigerian law, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. The court sentences you to 15 years imprisonment without possibility of parole. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Chief Adebola's shoulders sagged slightly, the only sign that the sentence had any impact on him. Miss Gloria Okonkwo, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud and aiding a criminal enterprise. The court sentences you to 5 years imprisonment, with possibility of parole after 3 years. Gloria's composure finally cracked. She began crying, the kind of desperate sobs that came from realizing that actions had consequences. Her expensive dreams had bought her a cell in Nigeria's most notorious women's prison. Mr. Kemi Adebayo. Justice Adebola's voice grew softer, acknowledging the complexity of his case. You have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud and theft of family assets. However, the court recognizes your cooperation with investigators and your wife's testimony regarding your manipulation by more experienced criminals. Adunni held her breath. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, she didn't want Kemi to spend decades in prison. She wanted him to learn, to grow, to somehow find redemption. The court sentences you to 3 years imprisonment, with possibility of parole after 18 months, conditional on full restitution to victims and completion of community service focused on financial literacy education. Kemi's knees buckled with relief. 3 years was serious, but it wasn't life-destroying. It was a chance at redemption, an opportunity to rebuild what he'd torn down. As the court session ended, Kemi turned to look at Adunni. Their eyes met across the crowded courtroom, and she saw something she hadn't seen in months: genuine remorse, deep understanding of what he'd lost, and perhaps the beginning of the man she'd once loved. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Adunni like bees around honey. Mrs. Adebayo, how does it feel to see your husband sentenced? Do you plan to divorce him? Will you be waiting for him when he's released? She faced the cameras with the same dignity that had carried her through market negotiations and police interviews. My husband made terrible choices that hurt our family and many others. Justice has been served. Now I focus on rebuilding our daughter's future and my own life. What about forgiveness? What about your marriage? The question she'd been avoiding for months hung in the humid Lagos air. 3 years was a long time, but it wasn't forever. Funmi would be in university by then, starting her own adult life. The question was whether Adunni wanted to spend those years healing or hating. Forgiveness is between my husband and God, she said finally. Trust must be earned, not given. We'll see what kind of man emerges from prison. That evening, at her market stall in Balogun, Marital helped her count the day's earnings. Business had been better than ever since the trial, partly from curiosity seekers, partly from women who saw her as a symbol of resistance against unfaithful husbands. Sister, that interview on television was powerful. You spoke like a queen addressing her subjects. Adunni smiled, arranging colorful girly headwraps for tomorrow's customers. I spoke like a woman who finally found her voice. Her phone buzzed with a message from Funmi, now thriving at the University of Lagos thanks to the reward money and compensation from the fraud case. Mama, I saw the news. I'm proud of you for standing up to Daddy and those criminals. You saved our family by refusing to be silent. Reading her daughter's words, Adunni felt the final piece of her broken heart click back into place. She'd lost a husband to greed and betrayal, but she'd gained something more valuable: self-respect, financial independence, and the knowledge that she could survive anything. The woman who discovered those bank statements 4 months ago was gone forever, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous to those who would try to take advantage of her. 3 blocks away, at the expensive restaurant where Kemi and Gloria had celebrated their doomed romance, new couples laughed and made promises they might not keep. The cycle of love, betrayal, and consequences continued, as eternal as Lagos traffic and just as unpredictable. But Adunni was no longer part of that cycle. She'd broken free, risen from the ashes of her marriage like a phoenix, and built something entirely her own. The faithful wife was dead. Long live the independent woman. The first letter arrived 6 weeks after sentencing, delivered to the market by a young man who looked embarrassed to be carrying mail from Kirikiri prison. Adunni almost threw it away unread, She'd spent months learning to live without Kemi's voice in her head, and she wasn't sure she wanted it back. But curiosity, that dangerous human weakness, won over wisdom. My dear Adunni, I know I have no right to write to you, no right to ask for your attention after everything I've done. But sitting in this cell, I finally understand what I threw away. Not the money, money comes and goes. I threw away 20 years of love, trust, and partnership for fantasies that were never real. The other inmates here, they ask me how I could betray a woman like you. When I tell them about your loyalty, your strength, your sacrifice, they look at me like I'm insane. That kind of woman is a gift from God, one old man told me. And you threw her away for a child young enough to be your daughter. He's right. I threw away a diamond to chase fool's gold. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve the chance to ask for it. But I need you to know that I see clearly now what I was too blind to see before. You were never holding me back, you were holding me together. Your husband, if I still have the right to call myself that, Kemi. Adunni folded the letter and put it in her purse, next to receipts from suppliers and appointment cards for Fami's university enrollment. It would take more than pretty words on prison stationery to repair 20 years of damage, but she had to admit, the man who wrote this letter sounded different from the one who'd stolen their daughter's school fees. At the market, Marital noticed her preoccupation. That look on your face means trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble? Letter from Kemi. Oh. The older woman nodded knowingly. Prison letters. They always sound sorry when they are locked up. The question is whether they'll still be sorry when they are free. Over the next few months, more letters arrived. Kemi wrote about prison programs he'd joined, financial literacy classes, anger management, even a group for men learning to rebuild relationships with families they'd hurt. He wrote about Gloria, who'd been transferred to a different facility after multiple fights with other inmates. She blames everyone except herself, you for calling the police, Chief Adebola for using her, even me for not being man enough to handle the pressure. I see now that she never loved me. She loved the idea of easy money and comfortable lifestyle. When those disappeared, so did her affection. But you, Adunni, you loved me when I had nothing. You supported me through unemployment, through failure, through my darkest moments. And I repaid that love with betrayal. I don't know how to forgive myself, much less ask you to forgive me. The letters painted a picture of genuine remorse, but Adunni had learned to be suspicious of men's words after being deceived so thoroughly. Actions mattered more than apologies. Then came the letter that changed everything. Adunni. Something happened today that I need to tell you about. A new inmate arrived, a young man named David who'd been involved in Yahoo internet fraud. He was bragging about how he'd scammed some stupid American woman out of her life savings, laughing about her desperation when she realized she'd lost everything. I found myself thinking about all the families Chief Adebola destroyed, including ours. I thought about that American woman, probably older, maybe widowed, trying to find love online and finding thieves instead. I thought about her sitting in her house somewhere, feeling the same betrayal you felt when you discovered what I'd done. I couldn't stay silent. I told him he was wrong, that stealing from lonely people wasn't clever, it was cowardly. He laughed at me, called me soft. Then I did something I should have done months ago when Chief Adebola first approached me. I fought back. The fight lasted about 30 seconds before the guards broke it up. I have a black and bruised ribs, and I'll probably spend 2 weeks in solitary confinement. But for the first time since my arrest, I feel like a man again. Not because I won a fight, but because I finally stood up for something right. I should have stood up for you, for our family, for honest work and honest living. Instead, I let greed make me weak. I let other people's opinions of success make me forget what actually mattered. I can't undo the past, but I can control what happens next. I'm not writing these letters to win you back, I'm writing them because you deserve to know that the man you married still exists somewhere inside the fool who betrayed you. Whether you forgive me or not, whether you wait for me or not, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the woman who loved me at my worst. Forever your husband in heart, Kemi. Adunni read the letter 3 times, sitting in her small apartment that no longer felt like a prison. Outside, Lagos hummed with its eternal energy, generators, traffic, music, life continuing despite individual tragedies and triumphs. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, she allowed herself to remember not just the pain Kemi had caused, but the joy they'd shared. His excitement when Femi took her first steps. His pride when Adunni's market stall became profitable enough to support their family. His tenderness during her father's funeral, when he'd held her while she cried and promised they'd face everything together. That man had existed. The question was whether prison could bring him back, or whether some betrayals carved wounds too deep to heal. Her phone rang. Femi, calling from university with her weekly update. Mama, how are you handling the letters? Adunni smiled despite herself. Her daughter had always been perceptive, able to read her mother's moods from across the city. How did you know about the letters? Prison mail has a distinctive envelope style. Plus, you've been less angry lately. Anger is easier than hope, isn't it? The wisdom in her 19-year-old daughter's voice made Adunni's chest tight with pride and sadness. Femi had been forced to grow up too quickly, watching her parents' marriage implode and learning adult lessons about betrayal and consequences. What do you think I should do? I think, Femi said carefully, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And giving someone a second chance doesn't mean pretending they never needed one. After hanging up, Adunni sat at her small dining table and pulled out a sheet of paper. For the first time in months, she began writing back. Kemi, I received your letters. All of them. The man who writes these words sounds like someone I used to know, someone I used to love. The question is whether that man will still exist when the prison gates open, or whether he'll disappear again when faced with life's real pressures. You have 18 months to prove that your repentance is real. 18 months to show that you've learned the difference between wanting to change and actually changing. I'm not promising to wait for you. I'm not promising to take you back. But I'm promising to listen when you get out. What you do with that opportunity will determine everything else. Adunni. She sealed the letter and walked to the post office, past couples holding hands and families sharing dinner and all the ordinary miracles of life that continued despite heartbreak. Redemption was possible, but it had to be earned one day, one choice, one small act of integrity at a time. The real test would come when Kemi walked free and had to prove that his prison letters were more than just words on paper. 18 months later, Adunni stood in the arrival area of Marital Muhammad Airport, watching passengers emerge from the domestic terminal. She wasn't there for Kemi, he was being released from Kirikiri prison later that morning. She was there for Femi, who was returning from a semester abroad at the University of Cape Town, a program made possible by the compensation money from Chief Adebola's conviction. Her daughter emerged from customs looking confident and cosmopolitan, carrying herself with the easy grace of a young woman who'd seen the world and found her place in it. At 21, Femi had become everything Adunni had hoped for: educated, independent, and strong enough to make her own choices about forgiveness and family. Mama. Femi's embrace smelled of airports and adventure, of a future bigger than Lagos's endless traffic jams. You look wonderful. Different. Stronger. They drove through Lagos in comfortable conversation, Femi sharing stories of South Africa while Adunni updated her on market business and family news. Neither of them mentioned the elephant in the conversation, Kemi's release, scheduled for this afternoon. Are you nervous? Femi finally asked as they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building. About seeing him? Or about you seeing him? Both. Adunni turned off the engine and sat quietly for a moment, listening to Lagos wake up around them. 2 years ago, this conversation would have been impossible. 2 years ago, she'd been a woman defined by her relationship to her husband, her identity tied to his success or failure. Now she was someone different. The market store had expanded into 3 stores. She'd completed courses in business management and accounting. She testified at fraud trials, appeared on television programs about domestic financial abuse, and become something of a local celebrity among women who'd survived similar betrayals. "I'm not nervous about seeing him," she said finally. "I'm curious. Prison changes people, but it doesn't always change them for the better. I want to see who walks out of those gates today." That afternoon, they stood outside Kirikiri prison with a small crowd of families waiting for released inmates. The massive walls and razor wire seemed designed to crush hope, but Adunni felt oddly peaceful. Whatever happened next, she'd already survived the worst of it. When Kemi finally emerged, carrying a small bag of possession and wearing the same clothes he'd been arrested in, he looked like a man who'd been hollowed out and rebuilt from the inside. He was thinner, grayer, but his eyes held something they'd lacked for years before his imprisonment: genuine humility. He saw them immediately but didn't rush over. Instead, he walked slowly, like a man approaching a judge who might deliver either salvation or damnation. "Adunni. Found me." His voice was quieter than she remembered, more careful. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure." "Daddy." Funmi stepped forward first, studying his face like she was solving a complex equation. "You look different. Prison does that to a man. Strips away everything false, everything pretended. What's left is either worth saving or worth throwing away." The 3 of them stood in awkward silence, 2 years of separation and pain creating a gulf that words couldn't easily bridge. Finally, Adunni spoke. "Are you hungry? We could go somewhere and talk." They chose a small buka near the market, the kind of local restaurant where honest food was served to honest people trying to make honest livings. As they ate jollof rice and fried plantain, Kemi told them about his prison experience, not the dramatic parts, but the small daily choices that had slowly rebuilt his character. "There's a man there, Papa Emeka, serving his 3rd sentence for fraud. He's been in and out of prison his whole life, always convinced he's smarter than everyone else, always sure his next scheme will make him rich. Watching him, I realized that was me, so focused on shortcuts to success that I'd forgotten how to build anything real." "What will you do now?" Funmi asked. "I've applied for a job with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Teaching financial literacy to young people, helping them recognize scams before they become victims or perpetrators. The pay is small, but the work is honest." Adunni looked up from her food, surprised. The EFCC job would mean working with the same agency that had prosecuted him, facing daily reminders of his crimes. It would also mean genuinely helping people avoid the mistakes he'd made. "They'll hire a convicted fraudster?" she asked. "Former victims of fraud schemes are actually their best educators. Who better to explain how criminals think than someone who used to be one?" He managed a small smile. "Besides, I have excellent references from the prosecutor who sent me to prison." After lunch, they walked through Balogun Market, past Adunni's expanded stalls and the countless traders building their dreams one sale at a time. Kemi stopped at Marital's table, where the older woman gave him the kind of stern look usually reserved for misbehaving children. "So, you're back," she said bluntly. "Yes, Ma. And what have you learned?" Kemi looked around the market, at the women who'd supported their families through determination and honest work, at the men who'd built businesses without stealing from their children, at the community that had continued thriving while he'd sat in prison. "I learned that this," he gestured to the bustling market, "is real wealth. Not the money in bank accounts, but the relationships, the respect, the knowledge that you've built something honest with your own hands." Marital nodded slowly. "Smart man. Took you long enough to figure it out." That evening, as they sat in Adunni's apartment, Funmi excused herself to give her parents privacy for the conversation they'd been avoiding all day. I don't expect you to take me back, Kemi said quietly. I don't expect forgiveness or trust or another chance. I just want you to know that every day in prison, I thought about what I destroyed. Not just the money, but the partnership we'd built, the respect you'd earned, the security our daughter deserved. Adunni studied his face in the lamplight, looking for traces of the man who'd stolen from his own family or the man who'd made promises 20 years ago at their wedding. What she saw was someone entirely new, not perfect, but genuinely changed. Kemi, I've built a life these past 2 years. A good life, an independent life. I've learned that I don't need a husband to be complete, to be successful, to be happy. His face fell slightly, but he nodded. I understand. But, she continued, I've also learned that choosing to share your life with someone is different from needing them to complete it. The question is whether you've become someone worth choosing. I'd like the chance to prove that I am. Outside their window, Lagos continued its eternal dance of ambition and survival, love and betrayal, dreams built up and torn down and built again. In apartments across the city, couples were having similar conversations about second chances, about forgiveness, about the space between love lost and love reborn. You can stay in the spare room, Adunni said finally. For now. But this isn't forgiveness, and it's not reconciliation. It's probation. You need to earn back trust the same way you earn back my attention, one honest day at a time. Kemi's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to let fall. That's more than I deserve. No, it's exactly what you deserve. Nothing more, nothing less. The man who betrayed me deserves nothing. But the man who spent 18 months learning to be better. He deserves a chance to prove it. The road back to love, if that's where this led, would be long and uncertain. But for the first time in 2 years, it felt like a journey worth attempting. 1 year later, Adunni stood in the garden of their new home in Ikeja, watching Kemi teach his grandson to kick a football. The house wasn't large or luxurious, but it belonged to them, purchased with her expanded market profits and a steady EFCC salary, built on honest foundations that would last. Funmi had graduated with honors and married a kind young doctor she'd met at university. Their son, baby Kemi, carried his grandfather's name but not his mistakes. This new generation would grow up with different values, different examples of what it meant to be a man and a husband. Mama, the caterers want to know if we need more jollof rice, Funmi called from the kitchen, where she was orchestrating preparations for their second wedding celebration. Not a renewal of old vows, but a commitment to new ones, promises built on experience rather than innocence, on choice rather than necessity. The past 3 years had taught Adunni the difference between love and dependency, between forgiveness and forgetting, between second chances and blind trust. Kemi had earned his way back into her life through consistent action rather than dramatic gestures. Small acts of integrity repeated daily until they became character. He'd kept his EFCC job, even when it meant traveling to rural communities for financial education programs that paid little but served many. He'd attended therapy sessions to understand how entitlement and shame had nearly destroyed his family. He'd rebuilt relationships not just with Adunni and Funmi, but with market traders, neighbors, and community members who'd watched his fall and recovery. Most importantly, he'd learned to find satisfaction in honest work and genuine relationships instead of chasing validation from strangers who'd never valued him anyway. The rice is perfect, Adunni replied, adjusting the Ankara dress she'd designed herself, a skill learned during the years when every naira mattered. But check on the palm wine. You know how your father's brothers get when they're thirsty. Through the window, she could see guests arriving for their intimate celebration. Not the elaborate traditional wedding they'd had 23 years ago, but a gathering of people who'd supported them through betrayal and recovery. Mama turned, now honorary grandmother to baby Kemi. Inspector Agbona, who'd become a family friend after the successful prosecution. Market traders who'd shown Adunni that a woman's worth wasn't measured by her husband's success. Even some of Kemi's former colleagues from his engineering days, men who'd remain honest when he'd chosen otherwise, who'd welcome him back into their professional circle without condescension or judgment. "Adunni, the pastor is here," Kemi called from the doorway. At 52, he looked older but healthier than he had before prison. The expensive clothes and false confidence were gone, replaced by the quiet dignity of a man who'd found peace with himself. Pastor Williams had counseled them through the difficult process of rebuilding trust. A wise man who understood that some wounds healed completely while others left scars that served as reminders. Their marriage bore scars, but it also bore new strength. "Are you ready?" Kemi asked, approaching with the careful respect he'd maintained even after moving back into their bedroom 6 months ago. "I've been ready for 3 years," she replied, taking his arm. "The question is whether you're ready for the promises we are about to make." "I've been practicing them every day since prison. Fidelity. Honesty. Partnership. Putting family before personal ambition." He paused, looking at their assembled guests. "These aren't just words anymore, Adunni. They're the foundation of who I've become." The ceremony was simple but profound. Instead of promising to love each other forever, they'd already proven love could survive betrayal. They promised to choose each other daily. To build rather than tear down. To face life's challenges as partners rather than opponents. "Marriage is not about finding the perfect person," Pastor Williams told their small gathering. "It's about two imperfect people choosing to build something perfect together, one decision at a time." When the time came to exchange rings, Adunni looked into Kemi's eyes and saw not the naive hope of their first wedding, but the earned wisdom of their second chance. "I choose you," she said simply. "Not because you've never hurt me, but because you've learned from the hurt you caused. Not because you're perfect, but because you're genuinely trying to be better." "I choose you," Kemi replied, "because you loved me when I couldn't love myself, and you were strong enough to let me face the consequences of my choices. Because you showed me that real strength isn't about having power over others, it's about having power over yourself." As they kissed to seal their new beginning, their grandson clapped his tiny hands and their guests cheered. But the real celebration was quieter, the knowledge that some mistakes could be overcome, some trust could be rebuilt, some love could survive even betrayal if both people were willing to do the hard work of healing. Later that evening, as they cleaned up together like they had during their poorest early years, Adunni reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The faithful wife betrayed by her husband's greed was gone, replaced by an independent woman who'd chosen to share her strength with a man worthy of it. "Do you ever regret it?" Kemi asked, washing dishes while she dried them. "The pain of forgiving me, the risk of trusting again." Adunni considered the question seriously. The easy answer was no, but their relationship had moved beyond easy answers. "I regret the necessity of it," she said finally. "I regret that you had to lose everything to understand what you had. I regret the years Funmi spent watching her parents' marriage fall apart. But forgiving you? Choosing to build something new from the ashes? No, I don't regret that. Even though some people think you were foolish to take me back. Some people thought I was foolish to turn you into the police too. Other people's opinions about our marriage stopped mattering the day I learned to value my own judgment more than their approval." As they finished cleaning, Kemi pulled out a small wrapped package. "I have something for you. Not jewelry or anything expensive, I know that's not what matters anymore. But something I made during our separation." Inside was a hand-carved wooden box, simple but beautiful, with their new wedding date engraved on the lid. Inside the box were letters, dozens of them, written during his imprisonment but never sent. "I wrote to you almost every day," he explained. "Not the letters I mailed, but letters where I walked through my shame, my regret, my slow understanding of what I destroyed. Letters where I tried to become the man you deserved." Adunni opened one at random. Day 127, "Today I met a man who'd been married to the same woman for 40 years. When I asked him his secret, he said, I never stopped choosing her. I realize now that I stopped choosing you years before Gloria appeared. I chose my ego over your feelings, my ambitions over our partnership, my fantasies over our reality. When I get out, I want to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. These letters, she said, closing the box carefully, are worth more than any jewelry you could have bought with stolen money. As they prepared for bed in their honest home, surrounded by photographs of their real achievements and their genuine community, Adunni felt the deep satisfaction that came from surviving the worst and building something better. Their story would never be perfect. They would always carry the scars of betrayal and recovery, the knowledge that love alone wasn't enough without respect, trust, and daily commitment to integrity. But it was their story, not the fairy tale they'd imagined at 20, but the mature love they'd built at 50. A love tested by greed, betrayal, and the temptation to give up, but ultimately strengthened by the choice to fight for something better. Outside their window, Lagos continued its eternal rhythm of dreams and disasters, success and failure, love found and love lost. Somewhere in the city, other couples were facing the same test that had nearly destroyed the Adebayo family. Some would survive, others wouldn't. The difference wouldn't be in the perfection of their love, but in their willingness to choose each other even after seeing each other's worst. As Adunni turned off the bedroom light, she smiled at the thought of the market women who would hear this story. They would debate it endlessly, some calling her foolish for taking back a cheating husband, others praising her wisdom in giving redemption a chance. But their opinions mattered less than the lesson embedded in her journey, that a woman's worth wasn't determined by her husband's choices, that loyalty without respect was just another form of slavery, and that sometimes the greatest act of love was refusing to enable someone's self-destruction. The faithful wife betrayed by her husband's greed had become something more powerful, a woman who understood that true partnership required two people committed not just to loving each other, but to becoming worthy of that love. In the darkness of their honest bedroom, surrounded by the sounds of Lagos never sleeping, Adunni Adebayo closed her eyes and dreamed not of the perfect marriage she'd once imagined, but of the real one she'd fought to build, scarred, tested, but ultimately unbreakable. The end was also a beginning. And that was exactly as it should be. Thank you for joining us for this powerful tale of betrayal, resilience, and redemption from Kismat's mythic tales. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for yourself. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more compelling African stories that celebrate the strength of women and the possibility of second chances. What did you think of Adunni's journey? Should she have taken Kemi back, or was forgiveness a mistake? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from our community. Until next time, remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's choices, and sometimes the greatest love requires the courage to demand better. Keep watching, keep sharing, and keep believing in the power of your own story. This is Kismat's Mythic Tales, where every story teaches us something about the strength we carry within ourselves. See you in the next episode.